With this being the month of love, and essentially almost the end of it, one topic I think that always gets discussed, and somebody was actually doing a video. I haven't watched all of it yet, but the title of the video got my interest. Basically the title of the video asked whether or not Sonic would ever be in a relationship. To an extent, probably asking if Sega would ever allow it to happen. And to me, I look at that kind of a question, and it's a good one to ask because we all know that Sega, depending on who you believe, has certain mandates and rules for its characters. One of the primary rules when it comes to the game characters is they cannot be in a relationship romantically. Like friendship and all that, and maybe flirtatiousness here and there, that's one thing. Full-on romance, that's totally, I guess you could say, taboo. But the question I think a lot of us would have is if it wasn't for any of the issues, if you will, that came along with having a romance for, your main character or other co-starring characters, if there wasn't various issues that came along with it, would, Sega allow it to happen? Would Sega be okay with it? And honestly, I think they would be. Yeah. I know that's kind of hard to believe, but if there wasn't any issues, pertaining to these romantic relationships, if there wasn't any fan debates, and arguments and flame wars going on as to who should be with who, then I don't think Sega would have an issue with it. And why? Because Sega knows, just like any other company, that having your main lead character or some of your co-starring characters in a romantic relationship actually does help the franchise. It does help, I guess you could say, create even more lore and create more interest, if you will, and invite more investment into said franchise and said characters if they are placed in a romantic relationship. Because now you pretty much, well, I'll put it this way, you don't shut the door on a lot of other things. No, you pretty much open the door for some new ideas, some new concepts. Like, let's say, Sega decides, okay, we're going to make Tangle and Whisper, an official LGBTQ couple, and we're going to put them in the next prime, Sonic game for all major consoles. And then, oh, by the way, them being in this relationship makes any co-op that players would have using them even more exciting because you could use different unique combos, if you will, that probably you wouldn't be able to use prior. Stuff like that. And again, this would all be depending on the fact that Sega, wouldn't see any issues, coming out of, this the decision to make it happen, to make it official. Because again, they would understand that by doing this, you create more fan interest and you get more people invested in what you're bringing to the table because you're expanding on, on the Sonic lore that you're trying to overall create, for the franchise right now all across certain medias that you want to interconnect. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, I don't think Sega would have an issue with romance, especially when it would come to the main character. But the only question is, who would they allow Sonic to be with? If they were to be okay with it. Well, obviously, the answer to that, game-wise, would be Amy, right? It would be Amy. Or would it be Amy? I mean, we do know that Blaze is also a game character. And some have even said that when you look at Tangle, that's another possibility, even Whisper. And if they feel like adding in the new Lanaline character, what's her name? Lanane, whatever, from the recent IDW comics, into the games, down the line, that is an acceptable character to, put Sonic with, in a romantic way. But like I said, I think the most obvious choice from a game perspective would be Amy because, throughout the history of the games, like I mentioned, the closest thing Sega would ever allow, to be in the games when it came from a romantic standpoint is flirtatiousness, is teasing, flirtatiousness, if you will, little hints here and there. And Amy, throughout her history, before she basically got a character upgrade, in the style that she has right now, which a lot of fans feel is a positive, Amy was always looked at as that character that always flirted with Sonic. She was always after Sonic. But recently, through certain games and even previous games in between, showed a lot of maturity. And that maturity definitely is something that fans could say, yeah, I can accept that Amy Rose potentially being Sonic's girlfriend. And I think if they wanted to, give the okay for Sonic to be in a relationship with no issues whatsoever, which I believe they would allow to happen if there were no issues, fan-wise, that the version of Amy we've been getting recently from Forces and Frontiers would be the Amy he would end up with. But then again, like I said, there are other possibilities. You have Tangle, who is adventurous and everything like Sonic, carefree at times. You could say, well, there's a compatible match. That could work. Sega would be cool with that. They're kind of similar in characters, similar in personality at times. Some would say Whisper would be a good choice because, if you plan to have her open up a lot more, not just in the comics, but in the games, personality-wise, that she could be the kind of character like a Sally, could, basically, I guess you could say, what's the word I'm looking for? Reel Sonic in and kind of keep him grounded, kind of keep him balanced because, hey, she might understand, yeah, I get it. You're adventurous. You like to go all over the place, have your freedom. But, there are times you can't do that, especially if we're in a situation to where you got to be serious. So I could see someone like her, being in that kind of position as a part of a relationship that would work without any issues. And then, of course, I brought up that Lanolin character that they, finally got an on-screen, in-action debut in the comics and potentially could lead to something in the games, if Sega allows it. And as I mentioned before, I look at her kind of being in that Sally position. Like, she wants to come up, like, you could tell she's coming up with the plans. She's more strategic at times than anything. And she fits that role of a Sally, to a T, just by the fact that you could tell she's going to be like the moderator between Whisper and Tangle while they're going through the situation they're going through in the next couple of issues. So they wanted to put Sonic with someone like her without any issues, pertaining to it. Then that could potentially be a good one too, because the dynamics would feel very familiar to a lot of fans. Sonic and Blaze, same thing with Lanolin and Sonic. Blaze is a princess, same as Sally was. Sally is, I should say. Not, well, is. You get the idea. The same as Sally. And Blaze is like a Sally. She's no nonsense at times when they have to get down to business. They have to get serious. So that's something too that could work. Because she too, like, Sally could ground Sonic and make him basically acknowledge, hey, I get it. You love your freedom. I respect that. I want you to have your freedom. But, there are times, you got to get serious. And, let's say they're on a mission together against Eggman. She could say, this is one of those times you got to get serious. You can't just act all, free willy-nilly kind of deal. So, characters like Lanolin and Blaze, I think fans would be fine with because they would have that familiar, I guess you could say that familiar repertoire. Sorry, I was trying to think about what I was going to say there for a moment. But they would have that familiar repertoire and persona that a certain princess of Archie Sonic and Satayam has or had during her relationship with Sonic as well. But yeah, I don't think they would have an issue, that being Sega overall, if there wasn't no issues, fan-wise, coming forth on making themselves well known when it came to the characters themselves. I don't think they would have an issue, whatsoever to put Sonic or any of the characters in a relationship. I don't think so. I mean, you look at Tails, they allowed him, I should say, to have a girlfriend not once but twice, in separate Sonic animated media. The one being the Sonic X media, third season, final season with Cosmo, and then Sonic Boom with Zoe. So there are various, there are various examples of, even in media that they're behind, they allow it to happen. They do allow romance to kind of, be inserted, especially if the story calls for it to, be a part of the, part of the story to help it progress, help it move along. Like the whole Cosmo relationship, was a major part of the final season, to help that move along and progress, and even help Tails grow, as a character, despite what he had to do at the end. And then you have the whole Zoe dynamic, and they allowed that because, you don't see Zoe that much after her initial debut, but still, it's pretty much hinted afterwards that she and Tails are in a relationship. So basically, Sega, there are examples of Sega saying, okay, go ahead, put them in a relationship. That's fine. But I think, as the overall, franchise goes, the lore, the continuity that, they've put together a team for, which includes Ian Flynn, apparently, that whole lore and continuity that they, trying to put together and interconnect across certain media, if they decided that putting romance, as a part of that, or inserting romance as a part of that would help it out, I think they would do it, but with the hopes and beliefs that fans wouldn't have an issue, as to whoever they would place some of the, game characters with, especially the main character. As long as they didn't have an issue, they didn't argue of, oh, well, this character is better for so-and-so than that person, or somebody else saying, oh, no, you're wrong, this person is better for this person than that person. As long as they didn't have something like that rearing its ugly head, I don't think they would have an issue. I really don't. I don't think they would have an issue, period, because they know, as well as anybody, that if you're going to, progress, and evolve, a franchise, you have to have romance as a part of it, especially when it comes to your main characters overall. You need to have romance. I mean, some of the best franchises out there today have romance, as a part of their, part of the stories, as part of their character stories, and it works, and it's helped make it a success. So to me, I look at the fact, honestly, I look at the fact that I truly believe, in my opinion, that Sega wouldn't have a problem whatsoever. I don't think they have an issue or a problem whatsoever with romance being part of the Sonic lore, the Sonic, continuity across all certain media, as long as there's no issues. As long as there's no issues and arguments as to who Sonic should be with, who Tails should be with, who Amy should be with, who Tangle should be with, who Whisper should be with, and so on. Who Rouge should be with, and that's another character too. Some are always saying Rouge and Knuckles are going to look like they could be an item, and there's been teases of flirtatiousness between them, even in alternate, universes like in Sonic Prime, and so on, and even in the games. And yeah, I'm not going to argue that. And would they put them together as an item? Well, it would go against Knuckles' character, but again, if there was no issues of, oh, she's better off with Shadow than Knuckles, then I don't think they would have a problem. I don't think they would have a problem whatsoever with that. Heck, if they wanted to put her with Sonic, they wouldn't have a problem with that either, as long as there wasn't any fans saying, going like, oh, well, she shouldn't be with Sonic, she's a manipulator and all that. No. No, as long as they didn't, have fans calling them out, crying foul and all that, to me, I don't think Sega would have an issue putting Sonic with someone like Rouge. But yeah, I don't think they do have an actual issue, or reasoning to want to prevent romance from being in the lore. I don't think they have any legit reasoning or issue. I think they would welcome it, in my opinion. I think they would welcome it, if there wasn't any issues. And that is what's basically holding them back, I think. Like I said, I think the only thing that is holding them back is the issues fans would have. Because I guarantee you, those Sega representatives that were there during the Archie Sonic run, they kept reporting. They kept sending notes in, about the stories. They probably read, early drafts or final drafts of all the stories. We cannot deny that. And they probably sent copies to the bosses who gave the okay. Hopefully. Despite what people may say, because it sounded like there was some communication issues, but not much. The only communication issues, I think, was within Archie itself. But, honestly, I guarantee you, those Sega representatives probably did tell the main bosses at Sega, yeah, some fans are kind of like debating on, who Sonic should be with romantically in this book, and, it's, causing this division. And I guarantee you, they took a lot of the notes and everything from their time, at Archie, as Sega representatives, from what they saw there from a story perspective, as well as probably what they've heard and saw, from the fandom perspective. I guarantee you they took it to Sega and said, yeah, we got to be careful of what we tease and everything, romantically or flirtatiously with Sonic or any of the characters right now, because there are some fans that will, go to war, legitimate war, for certain characters to be with each other, which is the truth. It is the truth. We cannot deny that. And I think because they know about that and everything, because of the representatives and other reasonings, this is why I think they're kind of reluctant right now. Again, I don't think they have an issue, because they know it will help advance and make the story in a way better and get people more interested and invested in what's to come and all that. But I think the big problem they have that's halting them, the big obstacle that they need to overcome and want to overcome, is the fans. Because despite what you may say, even the fans today still argue on over who Sonic should be with. Whether it's Amy, Sally, someone entirely different, whatever. They're still arguing about that. There are some fans that argue Tails should be with Zoe. Tails should be with, Cosmo. Tails should be with Rouge, believe it or not. Or Tails should be with Mina, or Tails should be with so-and-so and whatever. There are fans that still argue that too. The point is, if the fans didn't have, I guess you could say didn't have an abridgment issue, if you will, with who would be with who, romantically, I don't think Sega, would even give it one thought. I think if there wasn't any issue, if there wasn't any fan wars, flame wars, whatever you want to debate, I don't think they would give it one thought. And before you know it, if there wasn't any issues, they would put romance in the series. They would do it. And they've done it on several occasions. I mean, look at Sonic 06. Look at Sonic 06, believe it or not. That was kind of like, it had its issues, but look what they did there. And if that's an example of, hey, at least kind of showing that they can do it to an extent, then why not go all the way? Why not go all the way? And I think the reason they did it that way is because they knew, well, what if we throw them a curveball and go with this and see what happens? And yeah, they threw everybody a curveball, which is why some are not, very talkative of that, not because the game was bad or they feel the storyline was bad and all that. They're just not talkative about it because they still can't, kind of, conceive, oh, wait a minute, Sega did this? With Sonic in a romantic kind of setting with this Elise character, it's like, where did this come from? So I think that's why they don't really say much when it comes to it, because they don't know what to say, because it still baffles them. But that there, in a way, is an example that, yeah, there are issues, but the issues are so minuscule that, it's basically like, it really doesn't, at the end of the day, it really doesn't bother fans because, yeah, it happened, but it's like, okay, what's the next question they have is, when the next Sonic game coming? What new characters are we going to get? That's it. It just happened and then they moved on. And I think that's what Sega is looking at. I think Sega is like, hey, we're going to introduce the romance, and hopefully we do it in a way to where fans will be like, okay, cool, Sonic's with, Amy, Sonic's with Tangle. Oh, they finally introduced Sally, he's with Sally, and then move on. And then, the same with Tails, being with somebody, Knuckles being with somebody, Tangle and Whisper being together. It's like, okay, they finally did it romantically. They're adding romance now. That's cool. What's next? What's the next step? When's the next game? I think, honestly, that's what they want. They want fans to be like, okay, it's happened. It's there. Good. They're adding romance. They're putting the characters in relationships. That's great. What's next? What's the next game? What's the next, new character coming in and da-da-da. That, I think, is what Sega's wanting. They just want it to happen, for fans to accept it and then move on. Knowing it's there and then it's not an issue. But because of said issues is why I think they're reluctant. But again, would they be willing to allow it to happen? I would say yes. I think they are willing to allow it to happen. And I know some people might say, well, you're probably wrong about that. Am I? Am I wrong about that? Or am I right about it? Because when you think about it, what's really holding them back? Nothing. Nothing's really holding them back except the fans. And I think if they got the same reaction from the fans that they did with 06, as I mentioned, I think they would be cool with it. I think they wouldn't have a problem doing it. But what do you guys think? Do you think Sega will allow romance eventually into the comics to help build the lore that they want to build? Let me know down below in the comments, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. You will get an audio podcast version of this down the line at BW Rose's Discussions, all your favorite audio podcast locations. Check out the Teespring store. I got to get into the shower, guys, get myself ready for work. But let me know what your thoughts are, and I will talk to you all later.